we just got finished doing that. It was so good on 4, 5, 6, and 7. I want to go back to the seventh step for just a second before we head into 8 and 9. If you will notice at the very end of the seventh step prayer, it says, grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding, right? And it kind of, for me, infers that I have been working in this kind of spiritual cocoon. I've been dealing with all of this stuff on my own. I've been dealing with all of this stuff with God, and now I've opened myself up to actually share it with another man. Now I'm going to take this out into the world, which is where the real damage has been done. Where the real damage has been done. As a matter of fact, it says, now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. Okay, I love this line. We have a list of all persons we had harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. So, if I love me a ceremony, those are really cool, right? Yeah.
We said the third step prayer together. Can we say the seventh step prayer together?
I think that would be great. I think that's a great way to do it, dude. Yeah, let's do that. No. I'm going to get on my knees. If you guys want to get on your knees, that's great. If not, that's okay too. But let's do the seventh step prayer together, okay? That is on page 76. All right? It is the second paragraph, basically. When ready, we say something like this. After a moment of silence, let's whisper it again, okay? Slowly. And the prayer. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. Great call, John. That's a great call. Thank you so much. I also, it was pointed out to me a long time ago that at the end of the third step prayer, there's no amen, and that there is an amen at the end of the seventh step prayer, which kind of tells me that all the work that I've been doing between 4, 5, 6, and 7 has been a continuous prayer. You can believe what you want to believe. I kind of like the idea of that. So what I'm doing now is I've asked God to grant me strength as I go out from here. And then it says, we have a list of all the people we had harmed, that we owe amends to. We made it when we did our 4-step list, right? I love a good ceremony, love a good ceremony. I find it very, I don't know, Native American or whatever. I just dig it. But if you're going to do that, I think it's a fair thing to make a copy of your 4th step. Because if you're going to burn your 4th step and go, ooh, wah, it says you're going to need that for your 8th step. So at least keep a copy of your 4th step, okay? We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, here's another prayer, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. I am willing, God, to do this stuff. There were, I want to read one more thing, and then quite honestly, I'd like to have us share some 9th step stuff, right? At the top of page 77, well, let's get up to it. Okay, probably there's some misgivings. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel diffident, and diffident means like, I don't know about that, man. I don't know. I think that's straight out of the dictionary. The friends, we may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured. To some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. There's that word again, John. At the moment, and at the moment, we're trying to put our lives in order. At the moment, what I'm trying to do is, and I've tried my best to come up with a better term. It's not get even with the universe. It's not to get in balance with the universe, but to just like be as one with the universe. I've been taking and scratching and stealing. I'm a big thief. I was never good at it, but I used to steal baseball cards and like, NyQuil and crap like that. And I've been stealing and snatching and getting in the hole for years and years and years. And I want to go out there and spiritually and financially just get even with the universe. Just get even with the universe. At the moment, we're trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose, the real reason that I'm doing this, is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. And that is, if I am dodging around and doing all that stuff and I can't look you in the eye, I can't be of service, right? I'm always feeling a little less than. I'm always feeling this. I'm always feeling that. And it's not only am I trying to get spiritually fit, like I think we talked about last night. My real purpose, the reason I believe that I am here, is to be of maximum service to God and the people about me. That also includes physical fitness, right? Right? Yeah? Sure, oh, please, of course. No, Scott Lee.
Just, just a quick observation, and it's meant the world to me. Our real purpose to fit our. My purpose is not to be a maximum service. I have no idea how to do that. I wouldn't know which way to turn out of the driveway to start to do that. To fit myself in maximum service, I know exactly how to do that. That's what we're talking about. Do this step work, daily prayer and meditation, taking meetings into jails and treatment centers, saying please and thank you, the stuff that we do. Is to fit myself. The master craftsman reaches for the best tool closest to his hand. My job is to be the best tool I can be and reside as close to his hand as I can, and then he uses me. I don't have to figure out how to be maximum service.
And I just want to say I walk through life with Scott a lot. He lives just a couple blocks from me, and we hang out a lot. And I see him in life a lot. And I know when he says about, let's say please, thank you, say nice things, he's not just talking out his tuchus, right? And one of the most beautiful things that you have ever taught me by showing me was to be kind, to be kind to the person behind the counter. Be kind to the waitress whose first day it is, right? Be kind, man. The world needs kindness. The world needs kindness. So, I want to fit myself financially, right? If somebody, I don't need to be a drain on my kids. I don't need to be a drain on society, whatever. I need to fit myself emotionally. I need to be able to be there for my people. I need to be there for my people. And then it goes on at the end of our real purpose. I'm just going to read the rest of this paragraph. It is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice and announce that we've gone religious. Ooh. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. Why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message, but our man, and this is the part I really wanted to get to, but our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. He is going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than our talk of spiritual discoveries, right? So Scott tells me, if I owe somebody $1,000 that I swindled out of them, go there with 10%. a fleeting important thing went by. It'll come back. It'll come back. Yeah, yes, under promise, over deliver. You know, if I think it's going to be, you know, one of the hard amends that I made early on was I was working for this company, and I almost said I didn't steal money from them. I padded the expense account quite a lot, right? Right. I had receipts that weren't really real. It was a place that had beer there. They had beer there. I'd sneak in on Sundays and go grab a couple of 6-packs, and I swiped probably. I was swiped about 100 hours worth of stuff, right? And I had to go to my boss and say, "Hey, I am a thief, and I was wrong to do." And I've been stealing stuff, dude, and I was wrong to do this. And I showed him what it was. I said, "I think this is about 100 hours worth of work." Right, and if it's cool with you, I would like to try and work off this debt that I owe to you. And it took me a couple of months, right? Longer. I don't remember exactly, but I remember I would like work an extra hour and not charge it, and I was expecting to get fired, but it changed stuff between us. That was just an early one. Sorry. I really would. I'm sure you guys have stuff on 8, but I would love for us to talk 9th step stories. Okay. Okay.
I'll do 8 in 2 breaths. 8 is a list. We need a list. Write your list. Thank you.
That was the other thing I almost forgot. There's one very important rule about 8. You do not go from 8 to 9 by yourself. You need adult supervision, right? No. I need adult supervision, okay? I need somebody who knows my spiritual dementia and can help me with that.
Yeah, that was fabulous. It's critically important. If you haven't gotten to them, boy, the steps are numbered, so geniuses like us don't take them out of order. Get some help with it. John, you want to do something on this? You want me to go ahead? I'm going to run a while. Okay. So there are 5 prayers in the reading on steps 8 and 9. They're all for willingness to do it. I'm going to bounce around just a little bit about several things.
You say 5 prayers?
Say it again.
How many prayers were there?
I think I counted 5. They're on page 76, 79, 80, 82, and 83. And they're all about willingness. I've asked the man I sponsor not to use the word sorry. No one believes sorry anymore. We wore that out 2 decades ago. Far, far better to say, I was wrong. I believe I've harmed you. I'm ashamed. A combination of those 3, solid. Don't mess up an amend with an excuse. If you throw in the tiniest excuse for yourself, you'll take away all the power from them. I also asked the men I sponsor to not take the 4th breath while making amends. It's not a lecture course. It's not a lecture course. And if you keep talking, you're going to throw in an excuse. It's going to happen.
Explain that. If I give an excuse, it takes away their ability.
It takes away the power from them.
Power of forgiveness.
Yeah, the power of forgiveness. Yeah. And if you hadn't, then I wouldn't have. And you've wiped it out. Don't do it. I'm sorry.
What does 4th breath mean?
That means I don't want you talking very long. You get to inhale 3 times while making amends on a given amend, and then you're done. That's it. So here's amends to Mom. I was as good a son to you as I could have been, and I'm ashamed of that, and I believe I've harmed you. I'm living a better life these days, and part of that is to clean up my own mess. Do you need to talk to me about how I hurt you? How can I make it better? The end. That's it. That's it. If she wants to talk about it, yeah, you bet. I'm going to sit there and listen to all of it. My mother does not need to hear my 5th step. And me replaying what I did that I thought harmed her is not going to help her a bit. If she needs to talk about it, yeah, absolutely. But I do not need to bring it up. This is just what I do. I also I start my guy sponsoring at this point. By this time, he's got some message. And one of my great things I got from Don Pritz, I asked him what's a sponsor's primary responsibility. And he said it's not to allow the sponsee to settle for relief, but to get him all the way to recovery. By the time I get him to step 8, he's got relief. He's got a good job. He's been promoted. He brings the entire paycheck home. He knows where all the dents in the car came from. His key fits in the front door. When he walks in, they don't scatter. His phone rings. That's a miracle. He answers, another miracle. He's sleeping in the big bed again. Now, he may not have crossover privileges, but he's back in the big bed. So his motivation has waned. And my job is to keep him moving. So there are a couple of things I do on that. One is I get him sponsoring. And he says, I'm not ready. I say, good. I hope you don't ever think you're ready. I hope I don't ever think I'm ready. That's important stuff. Good, good. And what we're going to do is we're going to get you a rookie. And you're going to get that rookie's permission to talk to me in detail about his life. And I'm going to coach you through coaching him through these 12 steps. And that's how we're going to do that. And pretty quickly, he's going to realize he does not want his rookie to get to 8 before he finishes 9. It really helps keep him moving. The other thing is I apply is one day at a time. He got 60 of them. He's going to look and say to himself, I can't do 60 minutes. And he can't. You can do 1 tomorrow. So let's talk about the first 10. How can you be willing to make amend if you don't know what it is? So let's take the first 10. Let's talk about what that amend might be. All right, which one do you want to do first? Well, you're in a divorce and you want to do your future ex-mother-in-law? No, I don't think that's a good place to start. But if it makes any sense to me, sure, that's fine. Call him now. Schedule an appointment as soon as possible. Oh, tomorrow afternoon at 2? Great. I'll be looking for your call at 2:15. How did it go? Great. Wonderful. Who's next on the list? Call them right now. Schedule as soon as we're 60 days away from finishing this. It's applying one day at a time to doing the amends work. John and I were in Banff. Where were we when we did that?
Calgary.
Calgary. Yeah. And how do you approach a lady whose charms you've availed yourself of lightly without making her feel cheap? It's a doggone good question. The first part of the answer is don't. Get a woman from your home group to make the approach. You don't want her to have to answer to her new husband who that guy was on the phone and what did he want. Don't let that come up. So get a lady from your home group that's got some time, knows what she's doing. So I'm friends with John, and he believes he's harmed you. He'd like to make amends. Are you willing? If she says no, we're done. If she says yes, would you like face to face? You want an email? You want a text? You want a letter? What do you want? If he's going with her, if he's going to see it one-on-one in person, I'm going with him.
When you say I'm going with him, you're talking about the woman?
I'm the sponsor.
And I would recommend to my guys not to make sexual misconduct amends without the blessing of their spouse or significant other.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to come home and explain where I was
Yeah.
with the ex.
We got to be.
No, we were making amends, honey. It was,
Yeah. Yeah. At a Holiday Inn. Yeah. These, anyway, a table of ladies made a suggestion to us, and this is what we have. So she says, all right, he can talk to me on the phone. We scheduled a phone call. I wasn't as good a friend to you as I could have been. I disrespected you. And I believe I've done some damage. I would like to make it right. You need to talk to me about me. How can I make it right? That's enough. That's enough. Powerful thing. A couple of stories. The guy I sponsor on the third or fourth grade on the schoolyard on an autumn afternoon. He grabs another kid's stocking cap. Boom, it's gone. Nobody sees it. He flees it up the hill, up in the tree. It disappears. And he never comes clean on where the hat is. That kid's from a poor family and goes through that winter without a hat. And here we are 30 years later. He doesn't know the kid's name. The school is no longer there. I think it's pretty obvious that there's no way to make that amend. Don't you ever believe it. And we sit prayerfully. And the next day, all the kids at the orphanage in Nashville get a Tennessee Titan stocking cap. My sponsee got free. Don't doubt it. Do not doubt the power. I'll get a call from a sponsee saying I'm sponsoring a guy, and he fill in the blank, what's the amend? And my answer is always, the two of you sit prayerfully several times. And if you don't get an answer, call me back. They don't call. they don't call. A couple of pieces I think are critical. If I could tell the entire fellowship a single thing, it might be this next piece. Talking to a lady friend of mine in another state, and she is sponsoring a woman who had prostituted herself. And I think, generally speaking, we don't need to be on our own 9-step list. This one did. And what she came up with was she sat down with a pencil and figured out how much money she'd made doing that. And she earned that much money legitimately and donated it to Magdalene House and some other similar charities. What she said was, I sold my self-esteem, I'm buying it back. You get a chance to share that, please share it. Please share it, because that's a heavy one. And there's guys that have done it too, but that's a very, very heavy one. A couple of more things, and this one's a little bit controversial. This is just me. I hear people using a term, living amends. I don't seem to be able to find that in my book. I don't believe in the concept. Too many times I've seen somebody I'm going to make living amends. What that means is I'm going to keep being a good guy and that's enough. Well, it's not. And so my amends with my children are complete. Let me explain that to you. I've got a boy and a girl. I went to them individually, sat down, did the 4-breath thing. We talked about it. I asked for their forgiveness. They gave it. I received it. Today, I'm trying to be the best father I can be. It's not 9th-step work. It's 12th. Spiritually awakened men who have children try to be good fathers. Come down off the cross. If you've made amends to your children, you've made the amends. Keep being a good dad, but not from a position of guilt. And if you have not received, if they've forgiven you, and you're still upset about it, you've not received God's forgiveness or your own, and I think you have work to do. Now, forgive me, but that one's a little bit controversial. That's just where I am with it.
I'm sorry, but one thing that came out with me and my daughter is that she can't continue to use that against me either. Take that away.
Yeah, that's right. You can't. Good point, Gary. Thank you. I got one more piece. This is a gift from Miss Linda. It's my second spouse, and she calls it good amends. She said, you're pretty much aware of your sins of commission, the things you did that harmed people. What you've missed is the things you failed to do that harmed them. Not too far from here, I had my first set of flying license. I graduated from this college down here. As a senior in ROTC, on the way into the Air Force to be a pilot, I got 30 hours of flying time. And Colonel McLaurin was my instructor pilot. He saw immediately that I was one of the gifted ones. I'm not bragging. I didn't do anything to earn it. I could just do it. And he saw it immediately. And he would not let me coast. God, he worked me like a rented mule. And nothing I ever did was ever good enough for him. And in 30 hours of flying time, he set up my entire Air Force career. I never finished lower than second in anything flying an airplane from that day forward. Never. And I went back and thanked him. Went back to my major professor, Dr. Lundeen. And I said, man, I would not have graduated from college without you. Thank you. And I went to my mother. And I said, wow, thank you. What a great mom you were for me. Thank you for all your sacrifice. Thank you for all you taught me. Thank you for how gentle you were. Thank you for all of your love. Thank you for giving me the freedom to make my mistakes and the freedom to go when I needed to go. Thank you. What a fabulous mom you were. And then I went home and I wrote her a letter containing all that and some more, and I mailed it to her. My mother died in a nursing home of Alzheimer's, and at the end, she didn't have much left. She had that letter, and I challenge you. Who didn't you thank? Who deserved to hear more thank you than you gave them? It is a fantastic experience. And to me, 9 is the freedom step. I talked about it yesterday. The difference between being at large and being free is accepting responsibility. It's where I accept the responsibility. And the simple truth remains, I don't have the power to make a mistake so ugly that God can't turn it into something wonderful. Page 83. 2/3 of the way down the page. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. I paid for an abortion. I killed a child. I can't see that child. And I didn't think there was a way to make amends. And I was sat down and handed a plain white sheet of paper and said, write that child a letter. I've worked with a tremendous number of people since then doing this. And my experience is, step 4 has writing involved, the action of step 4 is the observations and prayers. In this exercise, there's writing involved. It is the tears that wash the windows of the soul. If you can't cry, not on command, but if you are not able to shed tears, I'm going to recommend you learn to cry before you try to make this amend. And I can teach you. I was sober 2 years, and a guy in my home group taught me to cry. I'm not kidding you. My email address is up there. You send me an email address and ask me about cry, and I'll mail it to you and teach you to cry. No baby was ever born unable to cry. The inability to cry is learned. It can be unlearned. You don't quit that crying, I'm going to give you a reason. The inability to cry has been learned. It can be unlearned. And my experience with this, it was the writing of the letter. It wasn't the writing. It was the tears that it brought. And I recommend you cry long and hard as you can. And when I was sure I was finished, I was told to sign it, Love, Dad. I had one more good cry in me. I was handed a plain white envelope and said, address the envelope. I said, where's the child? Well, with God, right, in heaven, address the envelope. And I addressed an envelope to an unborn child in heaven. No return address. I don't want this back. I was told extra postage. That's a long way from Nashville. And I mailed that and got free. As I described to you earlier, I don't hear fifth steps. I exchange. And one of the men I sponsor who had not been involved in abortion called me and said, I'm working with a guy involved in abortion, needs to do a letter. I don't have the experience. Would you sit with him? I said, absolutely. And when we finished the letter, and he signed it, Love, Dad, I handed him the plain envelope. And he said, I think I want to burn this. Not in the sense of destroying it, but to send it in smoke. I said, yeah, you bet. And we went out back, and he burned that and crumbled the ashes and put them on the roses, and he got free. And I don't have his permission to tell you that. He begged me to tell you because he got free. Because that's what happens here. When you do this thing, you have such a need to share it with anyone who needs it. That's what happens to us. I got one more story.
So what if you have one single person that you feel like you owe a lot of amends to? Are you trying to knock that out in like one go, or?
Can we talk one-on-one?
Yeah.
I think it might be better. The first thing I'm going to tell you is I agree with whatever your sponsor says, and I'm not laying off, but I'm willing to answer. But I believe God bless his sponsorship.
I don't know, his sponsor is Paul, I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, I'm already praying for you.
John's mine.
God is John, so.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have permission to tell the stories that I tell. This other guy that I sponsored had, he'd been living in a borrowed car, and it was a convertible and it leaked. And he'd just gotten enough money together to get into an efficiency apartment. He came home to an answering machine. Your younger guys asked someone, and the voicemail said, Mr. Schweiss, this is Agent Smith of the Internal Revenue Service. You have an appointment in my office at 1010 Church Street, Suite 400, Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. And if that's in conflict with your schedule, I'd like to suggest you change your schedule. And they hit him with a bill for $167,000. He's living in a borrowed car. He was a little bit thin on $167,000. And he said, what should I do? And I said, you want God to be real in your life? Treat him like he's real. Collect whatever they ask for, orderly. And when you go down to the next appointment, ask God to go with you. Do a prayer and meditation. Ask God to go with you. Hold the door. Go down to the car. Open the passage door. Move the junk. Ask him to get in. Close the door. Walk around. Drive your car in a manner that neither endangers nor enrages any of its other children. Get where you're going. Walk around the car. Open the door. Ask him to go in with you. He said he walked into the agent's office, and there were 2 chairs on his side of the desk. And he knew it was going to be okay. And 6 months later, they wrote him a check for $1,200. My own story, I have to be very careful when I tell this. I was a multi-line manufacturer's rep, and I had a sales manager who lived in another state. He'd been a Green Beret, and he was on the ground in Laos for 2 years, leading the Hill Tribesmen. And when he got there, they were carrying crossbows. They took him M16s and led them in combat in northern Laos and North Vietnam for 2 years. And he doesn't have a faint guess how many times he's killed with his hands. And I flew a gunship in Vietnam, and I flew the original side-firing gunship. We don't think we ever worked together, but guys flying my plane saved his banking more than once. We're pretty tight. We're drunk one night. He tells me he's sleeping with the boss's daughter. Let me tell you what this woman looked like. If your wife caught you in bed with her, she'd be proud of you. She was, oh, you can't believe Miss America here. Just absolutely gorgeous. And
My wife.
yeah, I do. Yeah, you're an exception. But anyway, so he told me about that. And I was drunk another time and said something about it, got back to him, and I lied my way out of it. And I got sober. And I'm going to have to tell him. And he comes to town about the time I get to Step 9 for a trade show at the Opryland Hotel. And I call him and say, I got to come over. He said, oh, yeah, I can't wait to see you. I mean, we were tight. And I did that when I told you. I asked God to go with me. I held the door. I put him in the car. And I can remember standing, I was on the third floor. I could probably take you to that room. I can remember standing outside the door of his hotel room like this, knowing that if this man decides to kill me in the next 5 minutes, I can't even slow him down. And I was able to knock on that door and go and tell him the truth. Because I'm no shining example here, but because of what you've done with me, because of the faith that I've been given, because of the cleansing that my soul had had. I went in there and told him the truth. And a couple of months later, my wife and I were guests at his home for a week when we visited his state. Don't doubt the power here is all I can tell you. Don't doubt the power. You want to follow that?
That's a tough act to follow. Thank you, Scott. I'm so grateful that the men in my life have not allowed me to BS on this step. I want to share a couple things and then share some stories. This is AA's payday. You know, if you're sitting around waiting, when am I getting mine, baby Jesus? You know, do some amends. Now, your payday is not going to look like what you think it's going to look like, but it's the best payday there is. And I think, you know, when Scott talks about making amends, I think you can say that a good amends has three characteristics. Accountability, there's ownership. I did X, end of sentence. The willingness to set it straight. That's the second piece. And that third piece that Scott talked about is the willingness to hear them out, gives them the ability to get free. When I made amends to my mother for the first time 33 years ago, I felt guilty about the money. I stole, well, the money that we know of, that we counted, you know, I stole like $3,500 from them over a period of a year in 1980 something, about $3,500, and their mortgage was $300 a month. So I stole a year's worth of mortgage from my parents, and they didn't have it. I mean, there was no. So I stole a lot of money from them, and I felt terrible about that, rightly so, and that's what I wanted to make the amends about, and I did, and you know, but she was not. Anyone who's a parent in here, we don't care about the money. There's not an amount of money that I wouldn't give up for my kids. You know, what had hurt her was the sleepless nights, the 3 a.m. when the phone rings. Is it the morgue? Is it the police? Where's my son? That was so I go in there with self-involved. I've got this agenda. I want to be free of what I feel bad for. But the second piece of this is I can set them free and allow them to heal in a way that was not previously possible. You know, so I can create that environment, and I think that's huge. My experience is that God will rearrange the universe to make any amends possible. We're dealing with spiritual math. 2 + 2 does not equal 4. If you owe $1 million and you make $50,000, let's just say take home $50,000, you might say, well, if I give every penny, it'll take me 20 years. Not true. Not true. If I bring willingness to the table, it'll be made much faster than you can imagine and in ways that you can't imagine. The first 9 years of my life, or my sobriety, I made all the easy amends. I made the amends that were keeping me from getting what I wanted, whether it be, in the good bed or cleaning up the credit report so I could get the car I wanted or the house I wanted. I wanted to make the amends that I thought would give me a better life. I wasn't much concerned about some of the other ones, and I put off a lot of amends. And they came back to haunt me. And when I talked about my crash and burn at 17 years, 18 years of sobriety, I really think that happened from not making amends. I don't sit around at length and trying to diagnose that, but what got me off the spiritual beam was not making amends. I believe more men drink again from not making amends than from not doing a fourth and fifth step. What happened to me is that by not doing amends I needed to make, I sat in the rooms of AA and I hear these cool 9-step stories, and I felt like a fraud. And there's nothing greater that will separate me from the herd than feeling like a fraud. And I just made a complete mess of my life, man. Stone cold sober in a year and a half time frame. I went bankrupt. I bought a business. I had no business buying, had no skill set to buy the business. I went bankrupt. My house is in foreclosure. My lights are being turned off. My cars are repossessed. I ruined my marriage to the best of my ability. All this, just everything I touched was a mess, and thank God I didn't drink again, but I thought about putting a pistol in my mouth, that's for sure. And as I told you, I reached out to Scott and said, man, I got to do this fourth step, and really, what I told you that, the big transformation for me was in getting this new conception, but what I'd been missing was making my amends, and the book really describes me well. I want to tell two. Do I have time to tell two stories?
Yeah, we got some time here. We got almost 30 minutes.
Perfect. I'll leave you one.
1.5, Barclay needs
Okay.
30 seconds.
No, I won't be that long. Two stories. So, in that making of a mess of my life, there was a lot of financial toxicity and just craziness. And I had a regular job, and I had this little side business, and we used to do business with the United States Post Office. We would deliver bulk business mail to the post office. And I had a selective way of filling out the paperwork that was in my financial best interest. If you didn't catch that, that's called fraud. The guy was dumb enough to trust me after a while. So we would bring in 50,000 pieces of mail at, just call it 25 cents a piece. That has whatever that math is. I think that's $12,500. And and you put it on the scale, and they verified, okay, you got 50,000 pieces, and they're 25 cents a piece, and this is what you owe us, and we write them a check. And after a while, he'd be like, oh, don't worry about weighing it. We're too backed up. Just, what do you got? Like, oh, I have 40,000 pieces, and because customers are giving me the money for the postage, and so if I can keep some of it and not give it to the post office, it's certainly justified, because post office, they're just idiots, and they're not delivering the mail correctly. Whatever it is, I'm stealing from the federal government is the short of it, and I that's not funny. I need to talk to your sponsor. And so I owed them a lot of money is the point. And I was going through the steps with somebody. Scott, I've been through the steps a couple times with Scott, and I've been through the steps with other guys. And it has this, what I have to tell you of doing this amends with this other guy has nothing to do with changing the person. I was just ready to do it. And so I was like, how do I make this amends? And he's like, well, I don't know. He's like, why don't you just start putting some money aside, and maybe, if I'd gone back into the post office and said, hey, this is what I did, I would have been obviously locked up. My kids would have probably starved. And the business that I was associated with had about 75 employees. They would have been cut off. And so there was grave consequences for me, not to go in there and fall on my sword, because I felt bad. But I have to make this right. And he said, just start setting some money aside. And I like what Bob Darrell says. Bob Darrell says you can classify your amends into 4 categories. I'm willing is one. I'm willing to do this. I'm able is another one. I'm willing, but I'm not able. And then there's I'm not able, but I'm not willing. And if you take care of the ones that you're just willing to do, God will kind of slide them over in the categories and make it possible, right? God will rearrange the universe for you to be at peace and to be free if you are willing. I do not care what your amends is. God will make that possible. And he made it possible for me in this situation. And so I was doing it with Harold, and he said, why don't you start setting some money aside? And I was doing pretty good at this point. We had started another business. I was doing pretty good. Somehow, I land on my feet a lot. And he said, start setting some money aside, and I did. And he's like, maybe you can donate it to a halfway house, or, start a little fund for guys to get, the first month in the halfway house or something like that. And we started talking. And around the same time, I told you I went to a recovery high school. It was the first recovery high school in the nation in the 80s. Maryland started. The judge sentenced me there. And it's since been burned down and so forth. And so there was this group of people in the area who wanted to start a recovery high school. And they enlisted me as their kind of poster child. I was the longest standing sober guy that had been through this school. And that effort over time didn't really work for a lot of reasons. It was down in Washington, D.C. But I kind of I was interested by what they were doing, and I felt this fire to do something about that. And I started setting this money aside. And me and this other woman that my wife's, this is kind of a convoluted story, but this other woman was involved. And we were driving out to help a group do a group inventory on a Sunday afternoon in Baltimore. And we started talking about how she loved this recovery high school idea. She was an educator, and she worked in youth programs and stuff. And we talked a couple of times, what a shame it was that it failed and stuff. And then, so one day we're driving, and I said, we got to do this. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, you know what I'm talking about. She said, oh, I was just so afraid one day you were going to say this to me. I said, we got to open a recovery high school. And at this time, the opioid epidemic where we lived was atrocious. They had a scoreboard on the highway of how many opioid deaths. It's still there. It just ticks every day. And so, I did not have any idea how this was going to work, but we just said, all right, I got a couple bucks aside, not, tens of thousands or anything like this, but I had enough money to start a little nonprofit. And I said, let's just start this, and let's just talk to people, and let's see what God's got in store. Our job is to do the footwork here. We started talking to a bunch of people, and we had a bunch of people that got involved, and said, this is a good idea, this is a good, before we knew, we had like 20 committee members, and we formed this board, and we had our first gala, and we raised a couple $100,000 at our first gala. And we're like, holy shit, like this thing might get some legs, And we got to this point where we had a milestone we wanted to reach in fundraising before we signed a lease on a building. So I was like the fundraising side, and her job was to get the license to run a high school in the state. And so we met this guy, a local philanthropist that had a lot of money, and we had reached that milestone, and we had signed a lease on this building, beautiful building in Frederick, on like 20 acres. It was the oldest building in the county. It was a beautiful old estate. And it was set up for classroom style. The church had it, and so we're leasing it from them. And we bring this big philanthropist. He's got $100 million, and I'm really excited. Right? We're going to get this guy for $1 million. And as soon as we start selling him on this idea, he's like, I could tell this is not happening. I'm a salesman. I know when someone's not interested. And so I started selling his wife. She loved the idea. And so afterwards we sit down, and we're going to do the shakedown, and we're shaking him down for a check, and he's like, this is an awful idea. How much money do you guys have? And I said, well, we've got almost 300,000. We're like 201. And we were on our way. And he said, you're gonna eat all that money up fixing this building. He's like, I've been in real estate development my whole life. I got rich doing real estate development. So I'm like, great. And they left. The next day, he calls me on the 4th of July. He says, hey, I've been researching what you're talking about. There's like a whole association about recovery high schools, and there's 50 of them nationwide. I said, yeah, He said, well, I really like the idea. And he said, well, do you think you can get out of that lease? I said, oh, yeah, I can get out of that lease. And, I mean, I've been moving out in the middle of the night my whole life, you know, there's no problem, shit. Right? You get a box of Glad black trash bags, you fill it up, you put it in the back of the Honda, you know, and you go. And so that was the 4th of July. He said, all right, I'm going to call you tomorrow. He said, I got these couple little properties that might work for you. And he told me what they were. And there was this one that we wanted that was right downtown Frederick. It was right near the train station and right near the public bus station. And so he calls me, July 5th, my AA birthday. And he says, I want to help you guys. And if you can get out at least, I'm going to help you. And I said, okay. And we talked about the buildings. I said, this is the building. The other one sucked. This is the building. And I looked it up on Zillow. It was like $1.9 million, almost $2 million. And he said, well, you know, I'll let you guys use this building. And I said, well, you know, you told me this building needed to be renovated, you know, that I needed a lot of work to do on the interior. And, you know, I've done the math. It's a $2 million building. You know, the rent's going to be about the same rent that we were paying before. You know, it's going to be $5,000 to $10,000. He said, I'll give you the building. And I said, wow. I said, didn't you say, though, it needed a lot of renovation? He said, I'm going to give you $200,000 cash to fix it up. And as a result of just being willing to start a little bit of 9-step work, set some money aside on a monthly basis, I still contribute. The next year, this foundation started the only recovery high school in the state of Maryland. We have about 15 students. Our first graduate is sober at the University of Vermont in a sober dorm, all from making an amends that couldn't happen. Just setting aside some money. But half the guys in the room have been to that recovery high school, talked there and stuff. I mean, God rearranged the whole universe to make this deal happen. Not just this guy giving this as a building, but during the heat of COVID, we were trying to get approval from the government, health department, you know, Department of Education. I mean, just insane things were, you know, as Scott says, you know, his God can help him win the lottery without even buying a ticket. And that's been my experience. If I'm just willing and I just show up, God will make it happen. And I got free of that. I got free of that amends. The other one I want to talk to you about is a little more, you might not believe it, it's a little bit longer story. So, as I told you, the first 9 years of my recovery, I did not want to make a lot of amends. And the biggest amends I didn't want to make was with my father. We all have our daddy issues, right? I hated my old man. And every time a sponsor would get me to this part of the work, I would just get a new sponsor. It seemed a lot easier than doing the step work. 77 says, the question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. It may be he has done us more harm than we have done him. And that's where I stopped reading. I felt like if I made amends to my old man for what I had done, it negated everything that he did to me. So the first 9 years I ignored it, and then my old man died. Every guy I talked to said, man, he's getting ready to die, go ahead and do it, go ahead, do it, and I didn't do it. And I carried, as Scott said, come down from the cross. I sat on that cross a long time. I just kind of ignored it, and then I train wrecked my life, and Scott and I going through the steps. And we wrote the letter. And I got relief from the letter. I felt better from the letter, but I could not, I hate to, Paul says all the time, do you feel me? Like, I wasn't feeling it. I don't know if that makes sense, right? Like, I wrote what Scott told me to write, but I didn't shed a tear. I didn't feel it, you know. I couldn't connect with it. And a couple years later, we're at Usual Suspects, and Howard Polance is leading. And he had daddy issues. We all do. And he said that his sponsor told him to make a list of all the things his father had done for him, even if it's the smallest things. If he made you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, write it down. Start with the small stuff. And I had a really small list. You know, my list at the beginning was, he gave me the love for the Washington Redskins. Now, you might think that's a curse, but he gave me a love for, East Coast. We were on the East Coast, right, for seafood, and it gave me a love for the beach, and his love for the holidays, transformed over to me. I love the romance of Christmas, and so he'd given me some things, and but it took me a long time to write that list, right? When we were at that retreat, and I heard that, I was like, wow, that's powerful. I'm going to do that, and I didn't do it, And then our friend Tommy T had the nerve to actually do it, and then he reported back like how powerful it was, and so I was like, oh shit, I got to do it. And so I made my list, but I still didn't. I still wasn't feeling it, And it wasn't that I owed an amends. I mean, there was an amends that wasn't owed, but I hadn't gotten free. I just don't know how to describe it, and I eventually got free. And what happened was after that, I said, I knew I'd heard Bill Cleveland do that blast radius analogy that I talked to you guys about earlier. And a couple days after hearing that blast radius description, I really owned this idea, just internalized this idea. It was just not about me. It had nothing to do with me. And then my mother, told me some secrets about their marriage that I probably didn't need to hear, which ended up being a real big blessing. She had told my wife, and she said, "Don't tell your husband," which of course, right, that means that's going to happen. But the story was, she wanted my wife to know that my father had an affair during their marriage, and during that most tumultuous time, that's what that was about. She said, but don't tell John, he already hates his father enough. And I told you my story of having an affair, and my wife and I had gotten through that, and our marriage was stronger, and I had made amends for that. And so what the average person would have thought would have been fuel for the fire, the only thing that came out of me was compassion. I finally understood we were just brothers in our defects. And I felt really good about it, and I felt it at a new level a totally different level of peace I'd ever been before, and I thought that was the end of it. And as our book says, cling to the thought that our dark past is the greatest possession we have, and I don't know, I can get through the story. I'll try. Take the mic if you need. We were doing a retreat last year, and this guy asked me to sponsor him. He heard me talk about that, and he's in Houston. He asked me to sponsor him, 20 years sober or something like that. And we started going through the work, and we did the 4-step together, and his dad was on his 4-step, and he said, but I don't know any amends. And I said, really? I said, when was the last time you talked to him? He said, about 10 years ago. Okay. No amends and no resentment. I get it. Okay. And I have permission to tell his story. And so Mike, in that part of the work, he said, all right, I'm going to do this. We talked, and one of the things that I like to do is have a conversation with the guy right before he goes in to make this amends. If he's unclear, if it's a tough one, a little pep talk, let's get focused exactly what we're going to say. And he said, okay, I'm going to do this. And I didn't believe him because I didn't do it, And like 2 days later, he calls me, leaves me a message, hey, I'm on the way to my dad's. I was like, holy moly. And he called his dad, and his dad answered the phone. He said, hello, with the tone of having no knowledge of who was on the other side. He had deleted his son's phone number. Okay, they hadn't seen each other about 7 or 10 years, many years. And he says, Dad, it's Mike. I want to come over and talk to you. And his dad says, well, what for? He says, I got some stuff I want to talk about. I don't want to do it over the phone. Can I come see you? And he said he had invited God to join him. And the whole time he just kept leaning on God because he knew it was going to be tumultuous. He knew there was going to be resistance. And his dad's tone the whole time, what do you want? Why are we doing this? And he just kept inviting God. As his dad was talking, he just kept inviting God for the words. He said, I just want to talk to you. I want to come over. And his dad says, well, when do you want to do this? And he says, how about right now? He says, that just jumped out of my mouth. And his dad says, fine, come over. And he comes over, the dad opens the door and turns his back to him and walks into the house. Not the most welcoming invitation to an amends. And they sit down, and Mike makes his amends as how I've instructed him to make them. And his dad wants to fight. Not physically, but he wants to fight. He wants to argue. He wants to be right. He wants to talk about the past. He wants, all this stuff. And it got to the point where the dad, Mike has a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and they haven't seen each other in about 7 years. And got to the point where the dad had calmed down some, and he'd been there a couple hours at this point, like 3 hours. And he just kept being quiet. Like his dad would get up and kind of, sulk and kind of storm around the room a little bit, and kind of come back and sit down. And, his dad kept wanting to leave, but he just sat there, man. Like the power of God was with him. And his dad would go in the kitchen, and kind of throw some dishes around, and come back. And so his dad says, all right, Mikey, where do we go from here? And he said, why don't you come over to the house and meet your grandson, your 1-year-old grandson? And that broke his dad open. His dad said, I didn't know I had a grandson. And his dad just wept uncontrollably. He had known about the 5-year-old, but he didn't know about the 1-year-old. And he just kept showing him pictures of the kid. And they hugged and they embraced and they cried together. And Mike knew he had to leave. It had been like 4 hours since he'd been there. And he's walking out. His dad says, where do we go from here? And he says, why don't you come over for dinner tonight and meet your grandson? And Dad comes over, rings the doorbell. Mike's there with his 5-year-old daughter, in his hand by his side and holding his 1-year-old. And the dad just starts weeping, man. And he can't take it. And he turns his back and he takes, 4 or 5 steps away from the door. And he just lets his dad do his thing, And the daughter, from the mouth of the babe, she says, what do we do, Daddy? And she said, why don't you go invite your grandfather in the house? And she walked over and grabbed his hand and walked him in the house. And he got to hold his grandson for the first time. He got his son back that day. I'm talking about the father. He got his son back that day. He got 2 grandkids that day. He reunited with Mike's wife. They made peace together. And that's why we do these weekends, because somebody in this room tonight is on the path to getting their father back. Someone in this room tonight is on the path to getting their son back in their life, their daughter back, right? Cling to the thought that the dark past is the greatest possession you have. And after 35 years, I'd finally gotten peace of what happened with my father. Really 25 years of not making the amends after he died. My failure finally was of use to another alcoholic and changed lives. Do not discount what happens in here. Do not discount the power of God. Any amends is possible. I don't have anything else.
Thanks for sharing that with us, John. That moves me so deeply every time. Thank you. Just a couple little pieces. I'm going to give it to Barclay. He's got another fabulous story. He touched on it, on the financial thing. I tell the guy, if you owe him 1,000, show up with at least 100. If you're absolutely certain you can pay him 100 a month, promise 50 and pay 100. Under promise, over deliver. New concept for most of us. The other piece is we're not asking you to turn your will and life over to the care of someone who may be in love with hating you. Big Ken, who I used to sponsor, said that before he got sober, he hated everybody and he wished there was more of them. And if somebody had come to make amends to him, he would have bashed them for the rest of their lives if they would have allowed it. And so, my sponsee and I prayerfully are final authority on what the amend is. The guy that he owes the amend to is not final authority. We are, prayerfully. We need to hear what he thinks it might be, and if it makes sense, go for it. But if not, tell him you and your sponsor have to pray about it, you'll get back to him. Yeah.
Last night, I mentioned kind of in passing that my father, again, my father was a very good guy. He really was. Everybody loved my dad, but he was also an alcoholic. And he 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 married my mom. He went through three marriages, and he left his third wife and was living with another woman, and he died from this disease. He was like 60 years old, and he died from this disease. And we found out at his the reading of his will that he had left everything. He was a successful veterinarian. He left everything to his third wife that he had already left. And I had a resentment. And for 3.5 years, I drank. I mean, truly. I mean, I talked about, go home, sit down, and drink until I passed out. What I didn't tell you is I would wake up every single morning, at 3 o'clock in the morning, every single morning, not, pissed, but in a rage, And I would drink myself back to sleep. I had a deal with myself. Okay, I'm going to drink myself back to sleep. If I can't drink myself back to sleep by 5, I'll change over to coffee and I'll go on into work. And I got ulcers and I got insanity, and but come on, that's a really good reason for a resentment, right? A couple of $1,000,000, right? And we ended up splitting the money that he had on him, right? I think I got $3,000 or something. So anyway, I came into these rooms, I got sober, and that was the last amends that I made. I think I told you, I did everything you asked me to do except sponsor guys. And I called up. Dad was dead, and Billy was his wife. And she had kind of, I mean, honestly, she had kind of wheedled her way into the deal and done the thing. And so I called her up. I said, "Hey, Billy, it's Barclay." She said, "Yeah." I said, I owe you an amends. When Dad died, I was not very kind to you at all. And that was really the best I could come up with at the time. I was 9 months sober, and the best that I could come up with was, I was not kind to you when Dad died. We had tried to sue her to get some of the money, but the state laws didn't allow that. I mean, he can give his money to whoever he wants to give his money to. So I said, I was wrong to do that, and I'd like to make it right. Is there anything I can do to make it right? And she said, "Never contact me again, ever." I said, "Okay." And I like to say, and I felt all better. But I did what I was supposed to do. I swept my side of the street, right? And it did give me some relief, but I'm kind of like you. I was not free at all. Every time money problems would come up, it would come up. And it just kept raising its head again and again and again. And so I continued to do. I'm from the Scott School, so I continued doing working through the steps, and she would come. She would come back up again, and I'd say, okay, what's my mistake in this? What's my mistake in this? And it just kind of stayed the same for a while, and then maybe 10 years into it, 15 years into it, it came to me that, she really was kind of the reason that I got in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because when I first got here, man, I just wanted to sleep. God, I just wanted to sleep through the night. I had not slept through the night in years, and I just wanted to sleep. And so, hey, she helped me get into the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. Hey, all right. And she, I did not get in touch with her or anything because she had specifically said, don't ever contact me again. And then, and I hate to admit this, but it's like 20 years, maybe 10 years ago, 10, something like that. It occurred to me, I mean, as I'm going through this work, that I told you that alcohol had killed 3 of the 5 people in my family. My mom committed suicide. My brother was on his way home from a bar one night and wrecked his new 280Z into a tree. And then my dad just fell over from kind of abusing his body. And my brother had gotten that 280Z. He'd been in a car wreck and gotten some money, and he got like $42,000. I'll never forget. He got $42,000. And with that $42,000, he kind of bought half a house, and he bought that car, and he bought a really badass sound system and an ounce of cocaine, because duh, right? And within 2 months, he was dead. Over $42,000. And it really became, I realized that, and this is maybe 5 years ago, that if I had gotten that amount of money when I was 26 years old, I would not be here, man. I would not be here. So I honestly owe her and my father my very life, man. Thank God. And what is that but that is a complete shift in perspective. It's a whole, and I'm free of that. I found my first, fourth step about 6 months ago, and everything was about money. I was mad at you because you made more money than me. I was mad at Bad Dad and Billy. I was mad at my wife for spending so much money. I was mad at my kids for costing so much money, And money just doesn't mean that much to me anymore. It just really doesn't. And I really want to thank you, John, because I have come to this new, kind of appreciation of this, and I am free of that resentment that nearly killed me. But I feel like there's more. I don't know what it is yet. I don't know. But I'm going to continue working. Continue turning it over. So don't doubt the power. Just keep doing the deal. I love you. Amen.
What Barclay said is there's always more. It's one of the most exciting things I've ever come across, is that there's always more. There's always more. I had major breakthroughs last year. I've been doing this a long time. I've been doing it with a lot of energy for a long time. There's always more. I can't wait to find out what's next. I can't wait. Is that it?
Dinner time.
Go away.